Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
One stop. This is what you get with this. Honestly,
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome on in, everybody. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1, the podcast where we dive into all things F1, race previews, race reviews, all sorts of things as we get you ready. And after last week being shorted on the canceled GP there in Imola, we are back at it again this week in the most interesting race on the calendar, it seems, every year, because it is simultaneously the most amazing and most exciting place to be on the calendar in F1, and also, according to the race lovers across the world, just an awful, terrible race. Monaco, the place where Dan Jimenez and I dream to be one day. My co-host Dan Jimenez on the other side of the ether. What's going on, Dan?
Just dreaming of a super yacht just parked up there in Monaco. Someday you and I will just be hanging out on the super yacht watching the race.
And maybe Kimmy will just walk up there and be like, "This is crap," and just have a drink on the old yacht. Although our yacht would be less exciting than probably a lot of others. Like this week when we saw the one that had the Ferrari being craned over water onto a super yacht. Somebody had to sign off on the insurance on that thing, because if that falls into the water, it wasn't in a crate either. This was a full-on F40 Ferrari. What do you think that thing was worth that they lifted onto that super yacht?
Oh, F40s go for like $3 million, $3.5 million.
Nothing. If it would have fallen on the super yacht, you probably would have done more damage to the super yacht money wise than you would have had.
Good point. I was looking into it, and it looks like it's a marketing like stunt that some dealer of high-end cars is doing, because the Ferrari, the F40 on the back of it has a license plate from some like high-end dealer brand. But yeah, they parked this thing on the front of the yacht, and so they're in the shots this weekend as you're watching the race. You'll see a nice big Ferrari red F40 sitting there. And then also I saw a video of Conor McGregor pulling up in his 63-foot Lamborghini yacht. I didn't even know Lamborghini made yachts, but McGregor has one, and he's there to watch the race.
That is quite. What's funny is he's made more money in the booze business, I think, that he did in the fight game. So I mean, that actually works out well. It's like, it's like, how much money do you have? How much alcohol do you have? Well, then you can be here at Monaco with us. Was it Carvana that was doing the Ferrari deal? Probably not. But
right.
It just is such a funny weekend as these guys get ready for this. The glitz and glam that surrounds the race, and these guys have to get ready for a race. But on top of it, everybody's chomping at the bit to ask them all of these questions that we had for Imola and all these questions that we had, going into this the triple header that we were about to get. And so, what are the biggest questions looming here as we get ready for Monaco in the next couple of days?
Red Bull, will they have the speed advantage that they've had all season at a track that is much slower? Like, their advantage is that they've got very little drag and a lot of downforce at high speed, but that's just not going to matter as much this weekend. And so it's going to level the playing field. And being that it's so hard to pass during the race, that if somebody has just a banger qualifying lap, Ferrari, Aston Martin, and they start the race in front of Red Bull, like, Red Bull might just not even have a chance of getting around them outside of pit strategy. So I think this is the best chance we will have all year of somebody beating Red Bull. So I think that's the big story.
There's also the off-track stuff that everybody kind of considers even more interesting, right? And especially because I think that at some point, some of the rumors, some of the driver, musical chairs that we at least kind of have in our head as to what could be happening, in the future for these drivers, there actually is stuff that gets asked at these press conferences. And I think one of my favorite questions, and this is such a Fernando Alonso response, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. He was asked about Alonso, of course, was asked about somebody else's career. Hey, Alonso, do you think Lewis should stay or go? Talking about from Mercedes-AMG. Here was Nando's response. Quote, I have no idea. But he always said that he wins and loses together with his team. So if he's not winning, he should stay. Which was I couldn't tell if it was just a massive burn or it was a don't just follow wherever the fastest car is going to be. But I could imagine a world where why can't we see Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso being on the same team?
Yeah, well, that would be wild if he goes down to the customer team, takes Lance's spot, or Fernando gets promoted or something.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the probability of Lewis going anywhere else is very low. I think that, I mean, he said in the press conference, I think today, when, these questions were asked of him, he's like, look, yeah, we've had a rough, year and a half, but, I believe in the direction of the team. It's kind of a bit of a non-answer, but I think that they're going to offer him, I think, the best money with the best probability of continuing to win. I think he's hungry for another championship. So unless he was going to Red Bull, I don't think that the grass is that much greener anywhere else, to be honest. And we'll find out soon how these upgrades really have, or if they're going to turn the season around for Mercedes. They've brought significant upgrades to this weekend, which is a bit surprising. A lot of people thought they were just going to bring him to Spain, but they're here now, and it's the zero side pod is gone. We've got big traditional side pod now. New front suspension with high anti-dive, which we've talked about in this podcast, is something that Red Bull is doing, and just a new floor. So a lot of the cars changed this weekend. And so we'll see soon enough. And maybe that's what Lewis is holding out for. Maybe he's waiting to see how this B-spec car performs over the next couple of weeks before he really commits.
Well, and that's what kind of changes really would make a difference at Monaco, a place where it's difficult to pass. It's unlike any of these other racetracks where you're not going to get a real good read on straight line speed necessarily compared to a lot of these other tracks. So what kind of upgrades would you get where you could actually tell some sort of a difference?
Yeah. At Monaco, you need every ounce of downforce you can get because you're not really getting it from the high speeds. And so the changes that they're doing out at Mercedes are going to allow them to run the car lower like Red Bull does and create more downforce. So I think that's the thesis behind bringing these changes to this weekend is like, if we had the last car that made terrible downforce, then we would just, be really in a bad spot. So the suspension design is probably the most interesting thing to me, that and the side pods. So I think we'll get a bit of a read this weekend, but it'll be more apparent come the next race in Spain.
Some of the spicy things that happened at the players' press conferences or the drivers' press conferences this week. I think the one when Leclerc was asked about the possibility of Charles Leclerc was just asked about what makes a good teammate, and he had a moment where he paused and then he looked and he said, "Hello, Lewis." And I don't know if he was just trying to game the system there. That was an interesting moment. I do have the moment as well when Ted Kravitz asked just straight up to Max Verstappen if Lewis to Red Bull was a plan, and here's what he said.
Could Lewis come to Red Bull?
No, I don't think that's happening.
To follow up on the Ferrari question. How are you anyway? How did you take the triple header becoming a double header? Is that a bit easier for you? And how did you spend the weekend after Imola was cancelled?
Well, mainly just here at home. Just continue training a bit, just staying in the loop a bit. But it was quite straightforward and normal that Imola was cancelled from my point of view. Now we are here. A triple header is always quite tough, so I don't mind that one was cancelled.
Is this the toughest race circuit of the year for your RB19?
Probably the most difficult one to win, probably, because that once you have a bit of a setback in qualifying, for example, you can't really pass in the race. So we'll see.
Yeah, but the strategy of last year proved that you can move things around.
Yeah,
okay, so you'll still.
So there you go. The standard answers, Dan, to it's going to be a tough race. I don't know how you can never pass anybody. The street king that we've made out of out of Sergio Perez, the things that happened last year that were or were not nefarious on his part to be able to start at the front of the grid and ended up winning that race. Where does that land in how this race is treated by Red Bull?
Thinking back to last year, as a reminder for the folks at home, Sergio crashed in the final minutes of Q3 when he was already on the pole and basically ended the qualifying session so that it guaranteed he started on pole, and then he went on to win the race. And then at the end of the season in Brazil, when Max was told to give up a spot for Sergio on the track so that Sergio could fight Charles for second, Max didn't do it and said something to the effect of, this is, kind of payback for Brazil. So that's for Monaco earlier in the year. So that's the context. If you're Red Bull, man, there can't be any antics, especially with those two so close in the standings right now, that if there's anything odd that happens like that again, everyone's going to be on top of it. The media is going to be on top of it. It's going to create a huge distraction. So I don't expect any gamesmanship from Sergio or Max. They're just going to go all out for it. But I think that they need to worry more about everybody else. I think Ferrari has probably the best car in slow corners, and Charles is awesome he is quick for one lap around Monaco, probably the quickest, but he's had terrible luck over the past few years. He's wrecked in qualifying, wrecked in the race. He wasn't able to start a race that he started on pole because he had hurt the gearbox, and they didn't figure it out until right when the race was starting. He's wrecked Niki Lauda's Ferrari during a parade lap. Mm-hmm. He's just had the world's worst luck in his hometown. And so I'm hoping for a turn of fortune for Charles, and that he actually wins this weekend. That's going to be my bold prediction.
Okay. I don't know what these car setups are anymore. You know what I mean? Like you hear about what these upgrades that they're going to be, quote unquote, we're bringing upgrades here, we're bringing upgrades there. But if there's a team that has a chance to win this race, obviously Charles has the most to prove at this track. I mean, he is from here, not just like half of the drivers who live there, or more than half that live there. As you heard, Max just be like, I just stayed here at home. I mean, this is the place that they all live. This is a place that they all kind of pal around in the offseason. So there's more on the table for him. But what about Fernando, and what about Aston Martin? Because if he's going to get 33, he really could do it this weekend. And if there's somebody who really could play spoiler and does not give any quarter, it's Fernando.
Yeah, I think the other element, too, is that there's rain in the forecast for this weekend. Ooh. And Sergio's good in the rain, but Fernando's really good in the rain. They asked him, like, hey, would you prefer dry or wet this weekend? He said, it doesn't matter to me. I think a lot of people would just prefer dry because it's already such a risky course to be driving. And it's like speed at Monaco comes from whoever can get their car closest to the walls lap by lap and not hit the wall. And I think Alonso, he's got the experience for it. He's got a really good car. He's really good in the wet. So if the rain comes, I think that Fernando stands a really good chance. And I agree, this is his best chance all season to beat Red Bull and get that 33rd win. And they're coming on a little bit of momentum from, an announcement around moving to Honda as their engine supplier in 2026. And so I think they've got a bit of a, pep in their step, and this might be their weekend.
Tell me a little bit about what this race and then going to Spain is in terms of like whiplash of tracks, and I think a lot of teams are waiting till Spain to do their upgrades, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was a bit of surprise. There are other upgrades that are coming that are a lot more minor than Mercedes, but Mercedes was the biggest one of all the teams. Spain is a very different track. Spain is where teams have so much data. The drivers have so much time driving around it. A lot of tests that have happened there in the past. And so every driver knows Spain like the back of their hand. And it's a much more forgiving track. New this year is they're taking out the chicane on like the third sector. That should increase the speed and the probability of passing under the DRS on the front stretch. So that element is new this year, but it's going to be very different than Monaco. It's high speed. It's more of your general kind of average F1 track versus Monaco being the shortest, the tightest, the slowest, and the highest attrition rate of any track on the circuit. So, we'll probably see half a dozen cars retire during the race. And so for somebody like, De Vries or Logan Sargent, this is a chance for them to, fight there closer to the points if they can have a good race and keep their nose clean.
So I also want to know a little bit about what some of these, these other teams that are in the middle of the midfield. I was listening to an interview with Otmar Snaffauer of Alpine, and that's a team that has a lot of question marks around it, but it's like also pretty dang. It can show up at these races, and I'm wondering what the midfield looks like. Is it actually this is the type of racetrack that they do put themselves a little bit further back, or is it one that you go, no, you could have an Alpine surprise winner, especially if rain is mixed into it? I just want the possibility of something more exciting than the 1-2 of Red Bull, and maybe that means Fernando winning, but he's also been on every podium, it seems like, this year except for one.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this race. It gives us the best chance for somebody, like you said, in the midfield to move up either through a really good Saturday qualifying session or making the right strategy call in the race if rain comes or if tire degradation is different than what people expect. And once you gain that track position, you can hold it. It's just very, very hard to pass. There's only one DRS zone on the front stretch. It's very short. It doesn't really provide a lot of an advantage. And so look to some surprising, finishing order for this race compared to what we've seen all year.
As we look at the rest of this race of this weekend, what's the future of Monaco? Because I know that at one point they started discussing that this racetrack is not the best for the competitive side of things. And new folks like myself to F1, relatively new, 5-6 years that I've been watching racing, Monaco is fun, but I also hear how boring it is in terms of not being able to pass. Where does it live in the future? Because you have some people who are like, you will never take this race away. I will die before you take this race away. And then others that go, hey, this isn't a really fun place for these drivers to come. But at the same time, the PR that surrounds Monaco and what it's the Las Vegas of the European races, I would assume. And so where does it live in the future of F1?
Man, I hope we never stop going there. I think that it should just be the staple on the calendar. We've been racing there since 1929 was the first race in Monaco, and has been part of every single Formula One season. And it's part of the Triple Crown of auto racing, the Triple Crown being the Indianapolis 500, the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the Monaco GP. So I just don't see a world where you could actually just dismiss it. Yeah, the racing doesn't have a ton of passing, but there's other tracks we go to that don't have a ton of passing. And it brings so much to the sport in terms of culture and identity and money. Obviously, it'll draw a big crowd in person, but also on TV. And it's part of Memorial Day weekend, which is like, I always call it racing Christmas. Like this weekend is racing Christmas,
right? Sure.
Because you've got the Indy 500 on Sunday. So wake up, watch Monaco, then turn to NBC and watch the Indy 500. And then if you're a real glutton for punishment, turn on the Coke 600 and watch 600 miles at Charlotte Motor Speedway.
What's funny is I feel like you'll do all those things.
I've done that so many times. I've watched all three.
Even if it's time-lapsed or whatever, even if you're going to do it, it's like midnight and you're going to catch the end of the recorded Coke 600, you're going to do it.
Oh, no. Back when I was working in racing, it was wake up, watch Monaco, go to church, come home, watch Indy 500, then jump in the car and go to Charlotte Motor Speedway and, use my credentials, get in and just sit on pit road and watch the race until midnight, get home about 1:30 a.m. and then have to be at work at 6:30 in the morning. So, it's racing Christmas this weekend,
guys.
That's
good. That's really fun. You should do it. And, when I was a kid, it's funny how much it's actually kind of come full circle. The Indy 500 for a long time was not talked about in the American sport zeitgeist that often. It would show up on the weekend of Memorial Day weekend, and you remember it being kind of maybe on NBC Sports or whatever. But I remember obsessing over those qualifying laps, the qualifying speeds. the insanity that is the Indy 500 and the historic part of what it is. I feel like that's coming back a little bit, don't you? And I can't help but think that the resurgence of F1 in the U.S. has probably helped that too.
I definitely think so. IndyCar is a great series. It's a spec series, so different from Formula One in that Formula One teams have to do all their own car development, where in IndyCar itself develops the car. And then you buy spec parts from IndyCar and their suppliers. And then it's up to each of the teams to do all the relative different setups. So different springs, roll bar settings, shocks, like motor development. But the car itself is like the same across all the teams. And so it's a super competitive series. The championship comes down to the last race of the season every season. And the Indy 500 is the most competitive race because it's just full out who's got the most guts, who can get the run at the right time. And it's always, winner takes the lead in the last 5 laps. I just can't remember one where anyone ever walked away with it, just with how the drafting works and how those cars are. It's super exciting. So I mean, if you're an F1 fan who needs more of a racing fix and wants to see a lot of passing, watch IndyCar.
I forgot that I got a text this week, and somebody asked me to ask you a question on engineering. This is now you and I haven't.
Here we go.
You and I have not discussed this beforehand, and so this is kind of like you're taking this question cold. But when all the sparks are flying off of a car coming down a straight, and it's whatever the protective plate is underneath, how on earth is that helpful toward these cars going fast?
Yeah, it's not. It does create some resistance and some drag, but it's pretty minor. And a lot of that, you'll see it more at the start of the race. And then as the race goes on, it'll wear down. And the goal is to get to a point in the race where you're like perfectly sealed off on the bottom, right? So you want a bit of wear at the beginning, especially the start of the weekend. There's rules around how much they can grind off of, those plates.
Right.
They can't grind off too much because it's essentially, you're getting the car effectively lower. So there's requirements around that. So the teams, they just engineer to that. They just know we're going to grind off a bit of this, but we're going to get it down to the bare minimum by the regulation so that we can run as low as possible. And it'll create a bit of drag, but you've got so much power pushing behind those cars from the motors and everything that, the bigger drag is the aero drag, the drag from, the contact of that plate, which is a pretty smooth plate on the asphalt, isn't that much.
What is that plate? Is it all titanium? Is that what it is? Is that the thing that creates all the sparks?
It's a good question. I would guess it's steel. I could look it up, but my guess is it's steel.
I was like, they'll probably want to just do whatever's light, right? Whatever they could get away with is the lightest thing that would. But I don't know how titanium would act scratching against, some concrete for some stretch of that. But whenever I see the sparks coming off it, I'm like, that is awesome. But also in a sport that talks so much about how. You can't have anything taken away a millisecond and 100th of a second. That always seemed to me like my physics teacher was, in my head going, well, the drag on that is actually creating, and I'm going, that I don't know how that, I'm going to have to ask Dan. And I had somebody who was like, ask Dan why the sparks are there.
Yeah. In NASCAR, the limiting factor is like the front splitter. And then so that's like the lip at the bottom of the front bumper. And so you had little wear pads there that you would measure how much the splitter's wearing. And we have 100% by design, you're going to wear the splitter down till it's like a very thin, piece of composite like carbon fiber and get it as thin as possible. And then on the rear of the car, the rear suspension arms, the truck arms that kind of extend and mount in the middle of the car, and there's a big mount underneath, big steel mount, and that also rubs as well. And so when you see sparks coming out of an NASCAR like cup car, that's from those suspension mounts dragging across the road surface. And again, we grind those down a tiny bit. You don't want to go through those too much because then you get into big issues. But it's all engineered to happen that way.
Okay. Look, give me. You already gave me a little bit of a peek into your surprise winner for this weekend. Give me a podium finish and maybe some surprises, some bold picks that we maybe wouldn't necessarily imagine for the weekend at Monaco.
I'm going to go Charles, Fernando, Sergio.
Charles
first, second,
on the
third.
top. Okay, say it again. Charles
on top, Fernando second, and Sergio Perez third.
Wow. What happened to Max?
I think his luck's going to run out.
Is this a DNF
I think his luck's
situation?
going to run out.
Okay.
Yeah, something's going to happen.
Okay. All right. If rain's there, then I'm all for it. Did we have a weird winner at Monaco? Not even just Sergio, but what was the race that Esteban Ocon stole maybe a couple of years back, or maybe it was last year?
Ocon, he won Hungaroring. I think that was the Hungary GP. But that was in the rain. I think and he got the right strategy call there. But we had Daniel Ricciardo win a few years ago. That was a bit of a surprise
2018,
win. Yeah. So
I'm going to go. You ready for this one? Somebody who he's annoying for me right now, but I think that he still, for some reason, is underrated, and he's definitely the better of the two teammates. I think George Russell is going to either be 1 or 2. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and say the upgrades that Mercedes they did it for a reason. Toto hasn't lost totally everything on in terms of smarts. I'm going to say Mercedes goes. I'm going to say George 1. I'm going to say Max 2, and I'm going to say Lewis 3. All right. Man, that's like we've seen that podium before, but we haven't seen George maybe on top of that podium before. But 2 Mercedes and a Red Bull planted in the middle we've seen before, so maybe that ends up being it. I'm going to say also surprise point winner for this weekend, Yuki Tsunoda. 8th place. Oh, yeah. 8th place at the high. I think that he'll be 8th, not or better, but he'll be at best 8th place. But I think he'll be 8, 9, or 10. He'll get some points in Monaco this weekend.
Yeah, I think Yuki's the one thing you and I can agree on. Like, I think we're all Team Yuki at this point.
Love it. I love it. And you know what? I just went through too, and I was looking at some pictures, some throwback Monaco pictures. A 1933 shot. I don't know what that turn is, that really, really super slow corner off the top of that bridge. It probably has a name of some sort. But there's this really cool shot that I'm looking at right now of one of these chitty chitty bang bang looking, racers from 1930 and the RB18 coming around that corner. And it's just that is some history right there, man. And, say what you will about whether or not this race is boring or whatever, it will never go away as this jewel of a race. So hopefully, that's the hope that I think most fans have. I do wish that they could figure out a way to make it more competitive, but it's not like you're going to change the racetrack much. It has to have some semblance of that history to be able to pull that thing off. So, all right, Dan, we're going to watch this race and get this thing going this weekend, and then we'll react next week as well to this one. Thanks for hanging out today, man. I appreciate it, as always.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't let those sparks get underneath the old wagon too much for you. Don't let it slow you down. All right. For Dan Jimenez, I'm Alex Kirry. Thanks again for listening to us. Rate, subscribe, tell friends about the podcast, and we'd love to get your reaction as well. Alex Kirry at Gmail. Dan Jimenez at Gmail is where you can find us. We'll see you next time, everybody.